Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are going to study Zechariah, the prophet Zechariah, chapter 6, that's Perek Vav. This vision is the final vision in the series of visions which we have been studying together that started in chapter 1. And as we saw, all of the visions are difficult to interpret. They are difficult to understand exactly what it is that Zechariah is trying to teach. And this is the final in that series. This particular vision that we're going to study today is probably one of the most difficult, and the commentaries over the years have attempted to explain it in many different ways. I am going to take the approach today that you shall see in just a moment, an approach that incorporates what exactly the message of all of these visions were, and which really culminates in the vision we're about to study, and the situation that the people were in. Remember, and we've emphasized this repeatedly, the people that had come back from Babylon and came to the land of Israel were expecting a grand return to Zion, reestablishing a king, reestablishing an independent kingdom, a beautiful temple, and all kinds of miracles and prophecies and so on. And what they had instead was they're still under the thumb of the oppressive Persian Empire. There's no independence. The king is not a king. The temple doesn't look like a temple. The people are depressed. And the primary job of Zechariah and the other prophets in this time period, Haggai and Malachi, is to encourage the people to know that God is still with them. It is up to them to build a temple, and then they will have the presence of God. But not, and that this can be the redemption if only the people would make it into the redemption. Now, why did the people have this vision? I'm going to explain this because why did the people think that everything was going to be grand and great? What was it that was in the mind of the people that Zechariah was talking to? What was the psychology of the people? What were the visions? What were the aspirations, and where did they come from? And Zechariah himself, what were the frames of reference that he used when he addressed the people and when he understood what it was that they expected, and in contrast to what it was that they actually saw? Well, we know that clearly what the visions that the people had, the ideas and aspirations and the expectations that the people had, came straight from the previous prophets that had prophesied about this glorious return to Zion. So it's extremely important, in order to understand today's vision, to go over several of the previous prophets and read the images that they used and the understanding that they had and the message that they imparted to the people back during the times of the first temple, as the first temple was being destroyed, and during the early period after the destruction. If we go back and study this, then we can have a handle on understanding what it is Zechariah is saying today. The approach that I'm going to take, most of the idea and the inspiration for it came from the Da'at Mikra series by a scholar in Israel, Zer Kavod. But I kind of embellished it and expanded on his ideas a little bit. And we need to go on a tour of previous prophets. And I'm going to pick and choose some of those images in order to portray the image that the people had. And then we can read the prophecy of Zechariah chapter 6, and it will make sense. Now, this approach is approach that the vast majority of the traditional commentators don't take. I do believe this is the right approach. I hope you enjoy it, and I'd be more than happy. I would love to hear comments regarding this. So let's start. For the first prophet I want to study is Chavakuk. So we're going to look back at the prophet of Chavakuk. You're, of course, welcome to go back to the podcast that I did on Chavakuk, and we're going to specifically concentrate on chapter 3. So let's look on chapter 3. First, let's read chapter 3, verse 3 to 6. Chavakuk is now talking about the future. He's talking about the future redemption that's off in a time when hopefully one day we will all be merit to see this. But he says the following image in 3:3 of Habakkuk. Eloham Teman Yavo. God will come from Teman. Teman is the south. God will come from Teman, v'kadosh mehar Paran Sela. And the holy God will come from Har Paran, the Mount Paran. This is the image of God returning to Jerusalem from exile. Kisa Shemayim Hodo. The heavens are covered with his glory. And his splendor fills the earth. Vinoga, and a shine. I want you to pay very close attention. A shine ka'ar tiyeh will be like a light. Karnayim yadolo. Rays of light will come off from each side of this image of God. V'sham chavyon uzo, and the power of his glory will be there in the presence of this of God, of this image of God returning from the south, coming back from exile, coming to the land of Israel. Lifanav yelech dover. Destruction comes before him. In other words, the enemies, the people that do not merit to participate in the redemption. V'yetze reshef l'raglo. Amod vayimoded eretz. Amad, he stood and he measured the land. Ra'a vayater goyim, he sees, and vayater, this has several translations, and he released nations from their bondage. Vayitpotzitzu harare ad, and the mountains of forever, those mountains that we thought of as being strong and forever, yispotzitzu, smashed. Now I want you to take this image. God coming, the shine, the glory of God coming from outside, from places far away, coming back to the land, and this image of these powerful mountains that are shaken and shattered. So take that image for a moment, and let us now look at the prophet Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu chapter 4. Okay, let's look in Yirmiyahu chapter 4. Now remember, Yirmiyahu is prophesying at the end of the first temple period. Look at Jeremiah chapter 4, verses 5 through 6. This is really, really important to absorb these images so that you understand what it is that Zechariah is saying. What does he say? Hagidu v'Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. I want you to say in the places, I want you to speak out in Judah and in Jerusalem. Hashmiu, let it be known, v'imru, tiku shofar ba'aretz. A shofar should be blasted throughout the land. Mal'u v'imru he asvu v'navo al arei hamitzar. And then it says, Su'u nes Tziona. I want you to set up a signpost saying, come to Jerusalem. I'm sorry. This is the key thing. I want you to hear this. I am bringing evil from the north. V'shever gadol, and a great disaster is going to come from the north. Pay attention. The image of the north being the source, the place from which destruction comes. The north being the place from which all the attackers against the people of Israel always come from the north. The north is representative of Babylon. Mitzafon tipotach hara. This is where it's going to come from, Jeremiah said earlier on. And now I want you to look in the same chapter of Jeremiah, chapter 4, verses 23 to 26. This is very important to understand this again. So let's look at these things. I saw the land, v'hinei tohu vavohu, it was empty and there was nothingness. B'el hashamayim ve'in oram, I looked to the heavens and there was no light. Remember, looking to the heavens in the time of destruction, one sees no light coming from there. Later in Zechariah, we'll see when one looks to the distance, one will see light, one will see shine when the redemption comes as opposed to destruction. Ra'isi heharim, this is crucial to understanding what we're about to study together. Verse 24, and I have seen the mountains. Kilu in on the mountains. I have seen the mountains, v'hinei Hashem, and they are shaking. Earthquakes, v'chol ha'gevaotis kalkalu, and all of the high places, all the hills are ruined. Ra'isi v'hinei ein ha'adam, v'cholov hashemayim nadadu. I have seen it, and there's no people. The animals, the birds, they've all ran away. Ra'isi, I have seen v'hinei ha'karmel midbar, and v'chol ha'rav nitzu mipnei Adonai mipnei chronapo, and everything has become desolate because of God's anger. So that's the image of destruction. But remember, we're looking to the north. We see no shine. We see no light. We see no God coming. And we see the mountains shaking. Again, that same image of the mountains shaking. When there's destruction, we look, we see no light shining, we see no God coming, we see the mountains themselves shaking, we see destruction. Okay, I know this is a lot, but this is really important to understanding each and every image that we're about to study in Zechariah, and it's going to be beautiful. It's going to make so much sense. So hang in there. Now, let's look at Yechezkel. Let's remember the concept in Yechezkel, Ezekiel. Ezekiel, if you remember, started off with the image of the Merkavah, the chariot of God. In the first chapter, he described the chariot and the glow and the shine and the glory. And if you remember, when we studied the entire book of Yechezkel, we pointed out that the underlying theme of the entire book of Yechezkel was the idea that the chariot of God started off in the temple, in the first temple, and God left. The chariot got up and flew out of the temple and abandoned the temple because it was no longer the temple that God desired because the people had defiled it. That chariot in Ezekiel then went and traveled along with the people into exile. The chariot of God went to the people in exile and resided there. That was one of the messages of Ezekiel, that God has not abandoned the Jewish people just because he abandoned the temple. He abandoned the building, but not the people. He is the present in exile with them. And then at the end of Ezekiel, we learned how the chariot and the presence of God came and traveled back to the temple in the vision of what we then described as the third temple. But it was really the temple of the future. It's the temple that the people now are hoping is being built now in the beginning of the second temple period. God is now back with the people. The chariot has returned. That is how the book of Ezekiel ended. But let's look carefully on how it was described. First, let us look at Yechezkel chapter 40, verse 3. This is very important again. When God describes, the prophet describes what he saw as God was returning to the third temple and rebuilding it. What did he see? Vayaveosi Shama, God brought me into the temple, Vihine Ish, and behold, I saw a man, Mar'eu Kemare Nechoshet. His appearance was like the appearance of shining copper or shining bronze. Uptil Pishtim Biado, and there was a rope of made of flax in his hand, uknei hamida, and he was there to measure in order to rebuild. So the angel showing Ezekiel had a shine, had a glow, and how did he describe it? He described it as the glow of copper. This is a very important image. Let's look to Yechezkel chapter 1 now for a minute. This is Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 7, when he's describing the chariot of God. How does he describe the shine? He describes it, v'notzitzim ke'ein nechoshet kalal, that the glow and the shine of God is like the color and the shine and the glow of nechoshet, that same shine, that same glow, the glow and shine of bronze or copper that's shiny and clean, and it glows and it spreads its shine all around. It's very crucial. It's important. So when Yechezkel describes the shine and the glow of the chariot of God that we just described, he describes it as the glow of nechoshet, the glow of copper. I want to look at Yechezkel chapter 43, Ezekiel chapter 43, because there are some images there that are very important as well. And that is the following. 43 verse 1, Vayolicheni al hashar, God brought me to the gate, Shar asher pona derech kadim, which was facing eastward. And what did he see? V'hine kvod Elohei Yisrael, I saw the honor, the God of Israel, bami derech kadim, he was coming back from the east. He was coming from the east. Remember, before we saw Elohami Teman Yavo, God was coming from the south. Now he's coming from the east. V'kolo kekol mayim rabim v'horetz he'ira mikvodo, and the land lit up from his glory, from his greatness. The land lit up. Remember that shine. That same shine, that same copper shine that I saw before, all the way back then on the Har Kavar, on the river Kavar back in Babylon, when God was leaving. I now see that shine and glow coming back to the temple. This is a very important concept. I want to now go and read one more prophet, and then we'll be able to look at our prophet Zechariah and understand what he's saying. Let's go to Haggai chapter 2, verse 22, and let's see what Haggai had to tell us. Remember, Haggai is saying this prophecy at the same time period when Zechariah was saying. He says, "V'hafachti kisei mamlachos," I will overturn the thrones of the kingdoms, the evil kingdoms. Vishmarati, and I will destroy Chozek, the strength of Mamlechos HaGoyim. I will destroy the strength of the power of the nations, the oppressive power of the Persians is what he's talking about. That's on top of you. I'm going to turn upside down. I'm going to destroy the chariots and her riders. The horses and their riders. Clue in on these words, I will turn it upside down. What Chagai is saying here is that the power of the horses and the chariots, those horses and chariots that belong to the Chozek Mamlechot HaGoyim, I will turn them upside down. It will be God's chariot returning, just like Ezekiel had described. It will be God's horses. The horses and riders of the enemy will go down in destruction, but it will be God's horses that will come. Because bayomahu, on that day, Chagai tells us, No Adonai Tziva'os, says God, Zerubbabel ben Shaltiel, I will take you, Zerubbabel, and I will make you v'samticha kachosam kivacha bacharti. I have chosen you, I will make you the leader, I will make you the Messiah. Remember, one more thing in the chapter of Zechariah, chapter 1, where he started off, what was the image that the people had in mind of the Persian Empire? The image of power, the image with which they ruled with an iron fist over their vast empire. It was the horses. It was the network of horses. Remember the vision of the first one. The Jews, as every time they saw those horses of the of the Persian Empire coming to check on them, to wield power over them, was a constant reminder that they were not independent, they were not powerful. Now that we have all these images in place, we can now study Zechariah chapter 6, and it will all make a lot of sense. All of a sudden, this chapter 6, which seems so difficult to interpret, will come in a beautiful shining light, and I use that pun on purpose. Va'ashuv, chapter 6, verse 1, Va'ashuv, and then I had another vision. Va'esa einai va'ere, and I raised up my eyes, and I saw v'hine arba markavos yotzos. I saw 4 chariots coming out, mibein shnei harim, from between 2 mountains. So I look in the distance, and I see this pair of mountains, which the previous prophets saw shaking, saw getting crushed in the destruction. But now I see these mountains, and these look different. These are mountains of copper. These are mountains from which there's the shine and the glory of God, God's chariot himself. Remember, hafachti, like Chagai said, those chariots are no longer the chariots of destruction, the chariots of the enemy, but these are the chariots of God. And what did I see? I saw those horses. In the beginning, Zechariah doesn't know. Are these horses of the oppressor that I'm seeing? Are these horses of the Persians? Or are these the horses of God? But we're going to find out in a minute. Remember all of the different colored horses, the horses of war, the horses of red, and the second chariot had black horses. In verse 3 now, and the third one had white horses. And on the fourth ones I saw spotted and speckled horses of different colors. So all different kinds of horses coming from, because when God comes from places all around the world, each one has a different character. Each one, the people that are coming back, God coming back from exile in his chariots is an image. Each place has a different quality, has a different way, has a different type, has a different path, and so on. Va'an va'omar. So then I said, and I answered, and I said, to the angel who speaks to me, what are these? What am I looking at? Am I seeing more destruction, or am I finally seeing the chariot of God coming back? Vayan hamalach vayomer elai, and the angel answered, and he told me, Eila arba ruchos hashamayim. These are the 4 corners of the earth, the 4 directions of heaven, east, north, south, west. This God is coming back from everywhere, coming back to Zion. Yotz os mehis yatzev. These horses were all standing el adon kol haaretz, over the master of the entire world. The Persians might have a vast kingdom, but Adon kol haaretz is so much more mighty, so much more powerful. These chariots are the hafachti, are the upside down ones. No longer are these the chariots of the Persian Empire, but now these are or any empire, or these are the chariots that were standing before God. And remember, what did those horses do for Persia? They were mishotetim. They went around, they spied around the world. They mishotetim b'chol aretz. Asher bohas usim hashchorim, the one with the black horses, yotzim el eretz tzafon, they are going to the northern lands. Remember what the northern land represents. That's where the key destruction always comes from, is the north. The white ones, they're coming from behind them. There's various ways to interpret that, but behind very often in Tanakh refers to the west. It's behind because that's where the sun sets. Achareim, Vahabrudim, Yatzu el Teman, and the Brudim, the spotted and speckled ones, they're coming from the south. Remember, God came from the south, Elami Teman Yavo, Viha Amutzim, and now the the Amutzim, which would be some other color pattern, Yatzu, they went out, Vayivakshu lo lechet lihisalech ba'aretz, and they asked God, they desired to go around the entire world. Okay? The ones that are to go to come from the east, they need to go search out the entire world. Vayomer lechu hisalchu ba'aretz. So then God answered them when they asked God. Remember, the horses were talking to their master in the first vision. The horses asked the master, which then was the master of war, was Persia. Now that master is Adon Kol Haaretz. So the next team of horses says, but there's still people out there. There's still Jewish people out there in exile. We can't go back yet. We need to be mishotate. We need to search out the world. We need to be mishalech ba'aretz. Because it's not done. It's not over. There's still many people out there. Remember, we pounded this theme. We studied this theme so many times in Zechariah and in the other prophets. So far, at the beginning of the Second Temple period, only a small number of Jews came back. And where did they come back from? They came back from Babylon, the ones that came. Vayaz Ekosi, and then he called out to me and he screamed to me, Vayidaber ilai lemar, the malach hadover bi, my angel, the one angel who's interpreting to me, told me, Re'ei hayotzim el haaretz tzafon, I want you to take care, look carefully at the ones that went out to the north where all the suffering came from. Heinichu et ruchi be'eretz tzafon, they calmed down my soul, my spirit, the spirit over here, the ruach of God, the spirit of God has been calmed down the land of the north. No longer is the land of the north a source of destruction, but the land of the north is a source of the shine of Nehoshet, the shine of copper. No longer now the chariots of God are returning, and they're searching around the entire world because it's time for the people to return. It's time for the people to come back. This is the vision, the final vision in this series of Zechariah. Now that Zechariah has this vision, we can read and understand very well the rest of chapter 6, which follows so beautifully. Vayehi dvar Adonai elai lemar, this is verse 9, the word of God then to me was as follows. No more is he dreaming, no more is the visions. Now it's practical. Lakoach me'es hagola, I want you to welcome, to take from the people that had been exiled. I want you to take some representatives. It's time to start to appoint our leaders and begin the rebuilding process and the establishment of what can be and should be the seeds of the redemption. May Cheldai, I want you to talk to Cheldai. Ume'es Tovia, these are people's names. Tovia, Ume'es Yedaya, Uvasah Tabayomahu, and I want you to come on that day. Yom Hahu, virtually always, and I repeat this a lot, is the day in the future, but if here it means the day of redemption, because the day of redemption is here. That's the theme of Zechariah. It can be and it should be here today. Uvasa Beis Yoshia ben Sephania, I want you to take these leaders, take these people, and go to the house of Yoshia, the son of Zephaniah, Asher Ba'u mi Bavel, that they all came from Bavel, from Babylon, from the north. Because remember, the north was calm. The north, Babylon, was the place where the people that had come to Jerusalem had come back from, returned from. Lokachta, I want you to take Kesef Vizav, gold and silver, Vyosisa Ataros, I want you to make crowns. V'samta b'rosh Yoshua ben Yotzadok HaKohen HaGadol, and one of those crowns I want you to place on the high priest, on the Kohen HaGadol, whose name was Yoshua ben Yotzadok. who is going to be the religious leader, the spiritual leader of the people in this new endeavor of reestablishing the temple. I want you to say to the Kohen, I want you to tell him, so says the Lord God. What is the message that God has for the religious and spiritual leadership? The message is, and this is beautiful, the message is that your realm is to be the religious and spiritual leader. The political leader, who is the leader who's going to build the land and a nation from a political level? He neish, behold here. What does he say to Yoshua ben Yotzarak? That over there is another man, Tzemach Shemo. His name is Tzemach. He is the Tzemach, the sprout, the Tzemach of David, the Tzemach of the descendant of David, who I have been referring to so many times in so many visions by that term, Zerubbabel, the one who's going to be the king, Umitachtav, and it is from him that will grow and sprout. Uvana Seichal Adonai. He will be the one that builds the house of God. The political leader will build a temple. You are going to be the high priest and run the service of the temple and teach the people and be a spiritual guide. So what is the message that God had for the spiritual leader? Don't mess around in politics. The political leader, the tzemach, is not you. You may be holy, you may be the one that goes into the Holy of Holies, but the political leader is not you, that's him. And he's the one that's going to build the temple. Again in verse 13, V'hu yivneh teichal Adonai. He is the one that is going to build the temple of God. V'hu yisod. He's going to be the one that has that glory, that great high glory of being the king. V'yashavu moshal al kiso. He's the one who will sit and rule on his throne. V'haya kohen al kiso. But there will also be next to him for guidance. He will also need to know that for spiritual guidance, he has to look to the spiritual leaders when it is in their realm. Next to his throne will be the high priest. V'atzas shalom. And what kind of relationship tiyeh ben shneim will be between them? Atzas shalom, the advice of peace. When we have a separation between the political leadership and the spiritual leadership, when they are separate, but each inform the other one when it's appropriate for their spheres, then we have an atzas shalom. Then we have the type of eitzah, the type of discussion, the type of understanding, which leads to shalom, which leads to peace. V'ha'ataros, and these two crowns, tihiyeh lechelem, they shall be held by chelem, which is presumably the same person as cheldai. L'tovia v'liyadaya u'lechein ben Safania, to these people, l'zikaron b'heichal Adonai. These thrones will stand as a remembrance in the temple of God. The thrones aren't even going to be worn by them. They're going to be held in the temple of God. And what will happen then? What will be the ultimate result when we set up the country in this beautiful way? Ruchokim yavo'u, people from far, far away. Because remember the vision that we started this chapter with, the vision of the whole misalchim b'chol haaretz. The horses, the chariots, the messengers of God are going to go through the entire land. And then the Rechokim, the people that are far away, they will all come back. Uvanu beichal Adonai, and they will build within the temple of God. You see a temple which looks lowly, which looks small, which looks tiny, which looks nothing like what you expected. But when the Rechokim come back, they will continue to build within this temple. It will become bigger, better, more beautiful, more wonderful. Vidatem, and then you will know ki Adonai tzivos shalachani. When this happens, then the prophet says, you will know that I am a messenger of God, aleichem. He's the one that sent me to you. V'haya, and when will this happen? How will all of these beautiful things happen? Only im shemoah tishme'un b'kol Adonai aleichem. If you listen to the voice, to the will, to the commands of the Lord your God. Thank you so much for studying Zechariah chapter 6 together. Looking forward to studying Zechariah 7 and the rest of this beautiful, beautiful book of Zechariah together.